Welcome back to the Mina Kimes Show featuring Lenny, the only NFL podcast where one of the host's favorite swim move is the doggy paddle. That's Lenny, podcast audience. He's actually making a rare physical appearance if you want to go check it out on YouTube. I'm Mina Kimes, and I am so happy to be joined by someone who hasn't been on the show in probably a year or so, Diante Lee of The Ringer NFL show. Has an amazing camera upgrade. Again, that's for the YouTube audience. Looking great. Welcome back to the show.
Glad to be back. Definitely look forward to doing this show for, I think this is 3, maybe 4 years now. I think I first started this when I was at PFF, and my title has changed, where I work at has changed. Obviously the camera quality has changed a bit, and microphone as well. But no, I'm glad to be here talking prospects. This is definitely a good time to do so as well.
Yeah, it's fun. We haven't really talked that much about what we think of the guys in the draft. I know there's at least one player we're both passionate about who we're going to be talking about today, who might be like my guy in the draft, but I feel like he's your guy. He might be too many of our guys. We're doing defense today. We're talking about the top edge rushers, defensive tackles, linebackers, corners, and safeties in this draft class. Last week we did offense. If you want to listen to Ben Solak and I argue about Tyler Warren. And then a little bit of housekeeping. Next week will be the final War Room. Very exciting. It's going to be with Daniel Jeremiah. And then it'll be the draft. It'll be here before you know it. So let's just jump right in and start. Let's start with the edge rushers, right? Because the first defensive player Travis Hunter. I keep forgetting, depending on how you classify him. But Abdul Carter is a guy who I don't think I have seen a single ranking big board mock who does not have him as the top edge. And I think that's a good place to start, Diante. Like, oh, wow, Lenny's actually putting his paws on my computer. So we'll see if that causes any chaos. Do you think he deserves that distinction? Like, do you view him not just as being the number one, but being in a separate tier from all of the other edge rushers in this class?
I think so. I mean, not only based on what he put on tape, in spite of the fact that it's just been a year that he's been a full-time edge, you look at the traits, I think they all kind of lend themselves towards him having a high ceiling. He was really productive. He's tough, right? Like, one of my favorite things to do is watch the Boise State game, and you can tell he's hurting, and he's still making plays with one arm, still playing with the high motor. He's got the speed. He has the explosiveness. And I think that even if you had any questions about him being a quote unquote undersized edge, there's enough that you see on tape in terms of feistiness on the edge that he can be a run defender. You're not somebody that needs to be a DPR, like a designated pass rush type. You're going to get just about everything you're looking for. And if you're going to have a guy that's like sub 265, you want him to have the kind of profile that Abdul Carter has.
Yeah, I am in agreement with you. I think we can get to what the questions are and maybe what separates him from some of the can't miss, like a Will Anderson type, for example, but I don't actually think there's that big of a gap, to be honest, but there are questions, and it is mostly size related. But starting with what I love about his game, the first thing that jumps off the tape, the speed, the explosiveness, the first step, and the bend. And, he has all of those things. This is dorky, but I just love his footwork too. He wins a lot with like Euro steps. He's so good at crossing face, going outside from to inside. He just moves really well. And yeah, you alluded to it. Like there's no projection here. This is not a Trevon Walker. We're going to talk about one of the more fascinating production versus traits guys in this draft. 12 sacks in 2024, 23 and a half TFLs. The TFLs are interesting actually, because so he's an interesting run defender because there's definitely flaws and sometimes the size does show up. But he also, sometimes his aggression really pays off. That's how you get to that number. And he wants to be good at it, which I think is really encouraging. Like the effort is not a question against the run.
Not at all. I mean, and like you said, there are a lot of kind of under 260-pound edge rushers here where the run defense is a bigger question, maybe from like a want-to perspective, right? Like how they play the run is a little different. With Abdul Carter, if he's taking on like a tackle and they're running inside zone at him, he can get buckled, right? You will see that come up a few times on tape where he can get thrown out of the club, or he just doesn't have enough lower body strength to deal with the 300-plus pound offensive tackle attacking him. But when he's taking chances, when he's knifing inside, when he gives you the Euro steps, and when he's able to use that first step that helps him so much as a pass rusher to just get a beat, get an angle on an offensive tackle, that's where you get to see that disruption from him as a run defender. And it's funny, when I was going back and watching him again before we came on the show, it's like, I think if you wanted to be pessimistic, you would look at some of this stuff and say, well, not every defense in the NFL allows their edge rushers to just knife inside as often as he does. But I think if you put him in a place where he can line up wide and you can allow him a little bit of freedom to go and attack in the run game, you can still get that TFL production. It's not going to be Khalil Mack where he's at 260-pound locking tackles out and pulling off hump moves on guys like Tristan Wirfs, right? But he is somebody who can be really productive as a run defender in that respect, being a disruptor, getting hands on guys, redirecting the run. And that's what you'd want from an undersized type of edge rusher.
Yeah, I think that's something too that makes me excited about the most likely landing spots for him. Cleveland, New York, maybe New England. All of those destinations, more so Cleveland and New York, especially Cleveland, I think he would be asked to do what you're describing. And in Cleveland's case, obviously, he'd be lined up across from the best pass rusher in the NFL, so which is a dream. I'm not saying that he has to be good. I think he is a true number one edge who has the potential as he grows again and develops more pass rushing reps. The fact that he already, I think, has a pretty good set of moves, being somewhat late to becoming a full-time edge rusher, should be immensely encouraging. So I'm not saying that. I think you could put him on a team with nobody and he would be fine. But if he was on one of those teams, holy guacamole. Because ideally you do want him rushing from that wide alignment. I will say, though, I did like in college, sometimes they would line him up inside and ask him to eat up double teams, and he did so, I thought, reasonably well. He's an unselfish player, I think, on tape. I guess, we kind of hinted at this, but I think the only question I have, I do not think he's a designated pass rusher. I do think he's more complete than that. But I do think whether or not he can, let's say, improve his run defense, but what it looks like in the NFL will probably, is at his size, which is, we should note this, he is smaller. He's 6'3", 251, got long arms though, so that helps mitigate that to some degree. But if the run defense hits a ceiling in the NFL and he does get pushed around a little bit, I think that to me is the only thing that really separates him from being like one of those top 10 dudes versus like a guy in that next tier, that 10 to 20 range.
If you're a believer that he can hit his absolute ceiling, you're looking at someone like Von Miller, who came into the league as a sub 250-pound edge rusher, and he was able to kind of build enough lower body strength and be able to use that explosiveness he has with his first step to try to find, just that explosive strength. It's not going to be lock guys out, throw them off. It's going to be somebody who can get underneath guys. You have angles. You're able to set up what you do as a run defender based on how effective you are as a pass rusher, right? Those are the tools that he can use to kind of hit that ceiling as a run defender. And that doesn't mean it's going to be 18 TFLs, right? And there are going to be some games, some tight ends, some tackles where you're going to be able to run right at him and he's going to give up yards at some times. But I think that what you're banking on is, with the freedom that you buy him, but being in that wider alignment, being able to attack and play aggressively, stop the run on the way to the quarterback, so to speak, that you're going to get enough TFL production where it all comes out in the wash, right? And you're not drafting a guy with this profile and asking him to be, a 4-eye. You're not asking him to be an under tackle where you're going to be in between the tackle and the tight end and you've got to take on blocks from both angles and all of that. You're going to line him up wide, let him go do what he does best, and you're going to hope that he grows as a run defender. This isn't Chop Robinson, from last year's draft, where he's always going to be on the weak side and you don't ever want guys running at him because he doesn't have that lower body strength. This is somebody who I think has a high enough ceiling as a run defender before you even get to what he can be as a pass rusher.
There is a guy later who reminded me a little bit of Chop Robinson. Can you guys
I wonder if it's the same, because I made a note about that guy too.
Who's your guy?
So mine was, and it actually kind of applies to two guys. It might be Donovan Ezeiruaku and Mike Green. Those are two guys I looked at and I'm like,
Mike Green, sure. I wrote Chop and Benito, but okay, well, so that's Abdul Carter. There's no debate there. So the way I should have said this at the beginning, I did tiers again, like I did with the receivers, and I have them ranked within the tiers. So, and I don't know yours. So we both agree Abdul Carter is in a tier of his own. After that, I ended up putting Jalen Walker and then Mike Green in a tier as my next two favorites. And then I have a tier with 4 players: Mykell Williams, Shemar Stewart, Donovan Ezeiruaku, and Pearce Jr. But honestly, I talked about Stewart a lot today, and I watched him for that, and I'm going to move Ezeiruaku above him after rewatching. But they're still in that tier. So who are your 2 and 3? Let's go there and then get to that tier.
So for me, I think the way I'm looking at it now is that Mike Green might be in his own tier as tier 2, and then all the rest of the guys are going to be in that tier 3 group. Maybe Shemar Stewart being behind all those guys just because it's so unproven. But yeah, my number 2 is going to be Mike Green, another guy who's kind of sub 260 edge rusher. I think his arm length is 32 inches, which is not far off from Abdul Carter. And this is another guy who not only has the speed traits, but has a lot of the production that you'd be looking for, especially coming from a smaller school playing at Marshall. The first step is there. It's not as violent as Abdul Carter's, but it's definitely there. And he's able to weaponize that to kind of set up, he knows how to use angles. He knows how to use his speed to set up counters, to set up different moves. He has good hand usage. I would say better than Carter right now because he spent more time as a full-time edge. So there's a little bit more polish there. The issue, and I think it's much more of a conversation with him than it is for Carter, and you kind of mentioned it, it's not that he's disinterested as a run defender because he will take on blocks. You just never feel him as a run defender. You don't see guys redirect. You don't see him lock guys out. You don't see him take the kind of chances that Carter does, knifing underneath blocks or trying to use an arm over to get himself free. He's just kind of there, right? Patting chests with the tight end, doesn't really make much of an impact in that from that respect. So there's just going to be a question about, is it a disinterest thing? Is it a coaching thing? Are you going to be able to use those traits that make him an effective pass rusher and apply that to who he is as a run defender?
Yeah, this is a funny draft after Carter because you have guys who are like good at run defense but don't have the production. Then you have guys who have the production but maybe not the traits or the run defense. Ezeiruaku is the one who has the production but not the traits. Green is the one, I think, who has the production but not the run defense. So he's my 3. We'll jump back to Jalon Walker, who I think merits he's a really complicated prospect. So Green, by the way, you alluded to this, Marshall, obviously, so then played inferior competition for the most part. So he did get 17 sacks, but that does come with somewhat of a grain of salt, I think.
Right.
And, his better games tended to be against worse players. I mean, there are times on tape, I wrote this, it looks like he is playing versus like high schoolers at times because it's almost like he moves at a different speed versus a lot of the offensive tackles that Marshall went up against. You see a lot of, he wins a lot of different ways, though. He wins with speed to power. He's got swim moves. He's got spin moves, a lot of spin moves, dip and rip. Like, he is pretty polished already, and he already has a good pass rush plan. I think, so I just wrote run defense question, and then I wrote he leaves his feet too much. That's just like a pet peeve of mine. So I just wrote Chop Robinson, Nick Bonito. Nick Bonito is an interesting one to me because he, I think has really developed during his time in the NFL. And I think you saw last year how useful he was in that Denver defense. And I think if a team could if he's Nick Bonito, that's, a mid first round is kind of where he's being projected. I think that's worthy pick, even if the run defense doesn't improve to the point you want it to. I will also add with him, if he falls or maybe he won't because nobody cares. I don't know. But he has character questions. So just really quickly, make sure I wrote this down. He was the reason he ended up in Marshall. He started at Virginia. He was suspended after a sexual assault allegation, was not charged. But they had a zero tolerance policy towards him. He had to sign one because he also had an allegation in high school. He mentioned those things at the combine, which is the first I had heard about them. And said that they had him investigated and he denied them. But that's also definitely part of his story. Let's go back to Walker, okay, because I have him above him. So Walker's a tough one, I think, for people. Because he's, first of all, let's start there. He's 6'1", 245. He played on and off the ball. I think the reason, if he falls, it'll be because he's seen as a tweener. I think, I don't want to say the floor because he's such a damn good player, but Frankie Louvu is the player who comes to mind, who's a great football player and different from Walker. I think Louvu, can play better off the ball. He's better in coverage. But I do think if a team like a Carolina or above is picking the second edge after Carter, they might ask Carolina, who knows Louvu, is that worth it to us?
Right. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, and I think that Lulu is much more of the case than a Hassan Reddick, right? Like Hassan Reddick as a tweener coming into the draft had all the traits in the world. And it's not that Jalen Walker is slow. It's not that he's not strong. There's just nothing that really pops in terms of athletic traits. And that just makes trying to suss out what his future is going to be a little tougher, right? Like, but he's clearly a solid football player, probably the best tackler in this group, right?
Really good.
He's got great motor. I think that he tries to play with the right technique more often than not. The fact that he is versatile, you can find different ways to use him, right? Georgia kind of put him everywhere. He was a spy on passing downs, if not a pure pass rusher. He was able to drop into coverage, not just from the line of scrimmage, but as an off ball linebacker. It's just that there's really no world changing film at either of the positions that he was playing at for you to feel like, okay, if we drop him in, we know that he can give us X right now, and then maybe he can grow into Y as time passes. I think it's a project, whether you view him more as an off ball guy or as an edge player. And then as an edge player, for a guy that's 6'1", you're not dealing with long arms, right? He's not a long armed guy where the wingspan far outsizes his height, right? It's not bad, but it's not special. And then if you're looking for polish in terms of him as a pass rusher, you don't see a bunch of moves, right? It's a lot of pocket pushing. It's a lot of trying to win the edge without bend. It's a lot of second efforts. A lot of his sacks and QB hits have come when he's kind of a spy or on cleanup pressures. Like, I was maybe being a little harsh when I was watching him because I was looking
Yeah.
for something after coming off of watching like Mike Green, Abdul Carter, Donovan Ezeiruaku, who's a really polished pass rusher. I'm like, I just don't see any of those things. If you're making a sales pitch on those guys, none of that really applies to Walker. So a lot of this is you got an experienced football player who knows what he's doing, who can fit a bunch of different roles, and you just believe based on his work ethic and what you see on tape in terms of kind of his polish and understanding the game of football, I should say, that he is going to become a good edge rusher or going to become a good off ball backer. I just don't see that as a top 10 pick, even in a class that doesn't have a lot of blue chip talent.
So we disagree about him, which is fun. Obviously, since I have him above Green. I think where I disagree, you said, because a lot of what you said I do agree with. You said, though, nothing pops. I think the way he moves in space really pops to me. I posted the clip of him hawking down Arch Manning. I don't know if you remember that play where he just like completely. But there's a lot of plays like that where he just closes with such speed and violence. Whether it's sometimes it's from the backside, he'll just fly in out of nowhere. I think he moves in a really unique way, and I do think he is uniquely explosive. I'm absolutely right about the pass rushing moves. It's a lot of speed to power, a lot of speed. But I do love his play strength, and I think he, more so than Green and some of the others, can become a plus run defender off the edge as well. I think ideally in terms of his utilization, so I think he's a pass rusher more than an off-ball linebacker. But I think about how like Micah Parsons was used his first year before they were like, all right, this is the best edge rusher in the NFL. What are we doing? Where it was like, I want to say like 30% off the ball, maybe. Like that's, I think, the kind of ratio you want. I would love him in Carolina for that reason, in a 3-4 under a Giro Evero. Again, I know the Luvu thing is, but I do think he's a really good fit for that style of defense. Yeah, I don't know. I think, the height is concerning. I think he's got decent length, though. It's not freakish, but it's definitely long enough. I think for me, it's just that the way he moves in space and his arc speed too. Like when he corners, I see it. I see the athletic tools. So I like him a lot, but I do think he is like you either love him or you got questions about the tweener stuff. And I think they're fair. They're totally fair. So, okay. So you had him behind
Mike
Green the next year, and then
Green
you had
his own tier.
Walker in the next year. Okay. So the group of 4 who I listed, Mykell Williams, Shemar Stewart, Ezeiruaku. I'm going to put Ezeiruaku up. And then I did Pearce Jr. Is there anyone else you think deserves to be in this conversation?
No, I would say this is the group. I mean, there are some interesting guys outside of this group who are going to be day two types who you can maybe find something with. A lot of who are probably going to be high value role players, maybe quality starters. But I think if you're talking about ceilings, the group that we have here is probably as close to the high ceiling guys as you're going to get at this position group.
I have joked that Ezeiruaku plus Stewart would make the perfect football player.
Yeah.
But they're both just completely missing what the other has. It truly is like a yin and yang. They are the two sides of the production versus traits debate for me.
Yes.
So let's do that.
1000%.
Because Mykell Williams, I think, is more of like let's talk about Georgia football guy. And I had him above them. But let's talk about Ezeiruaku and Stewart together, because I think that put on your GM hat. You are, oh God, who's a team who might be the Falcons? The Falcons are a great example, right? Because I think both these guys, this is probably rich for Ezeiruaku by most people's estimation. But if you're a team that desperately needs edge rush, which of these two players would you rather have?
I'm going Ezeiruaku, right? Like, to me, I love the way you frame this as how a coach might feel versus how a GM might feel. If I'm a GM, I'm looking at Shemar Stewart and I'm like, man, the 40 time, the vertical, the size, the arm length.
An Adonis.
You're trying to tell me you can't make a good football player out of this guy, right? And he had all these kind of tweener things where he was playing above the weight that he was at the combine. I do think him being sub 270 is going to be a better fit for him going forward, especially if you look at him as an edge rusher. But then if you're a coach, you look at Ezeiruaku and it's like, I don't have to teach that guy how to be an edge rusher. Right. I don't have to teach him anything. He's got the hand use. He's got the length, right? He's not always a bender, but there's enough there. And in the ways that he loses as a bender or trying to corner, he has great counter moves to be able to stay on his pass rush plan. To me, the thing for him is that the light body is probably going to be a deal breaker for a lot of teams. And it looks like he's a lighter edge rusher, right? Like, there's not a lot of times where you see him use that length, use that speed as a run defender, or when things get bad for him out on the edge. And it is going to make him, I think, a little bit tighter kind of projection in the NFL. Not every team's going to look at him and think that he's going to be their lead pass rush type. So it's going to be tough for him in that respect. With Shemar Stewart, it's like, oh man, if you could just turn this into one game, if I just had one college game where it was like, oh my God, he just tore off the edge, had 2 or 3 sacks, had 4 TFLs, and you just had that picture, it would be a lot easier for me to make the sales pitch. I just look at him and I'm like, this feels like a 2 years away from being 2 years away type of player at its worst. And there's just too much wait and see for me with his projection.
So I probably should have given this context. Shemar Stewart, Texas A&M, has 4.5 career sacks.
Yeah.
Over the last 20 years, only one player, one edge, has been drafted in the first round with less than 5 sacks. Can you name who it is?
I was talking to Fran Duffy, and I think that he gave me the name, and I lost it.
Ziggy
I lost it. Who was it?
Ziggy Ansah.
Oof.
So Danielle Hunter is the name who comes to mind for everybody because he didn't have the production at LSU, but he was drafted in the 3rd round.
Right.
So, and there's some, like Armstead, but he's a defensive end. There's some other guys. It would be fairly unprecedented for a player with this little production now. And I think when you're looking at the production, I was just actually talking to Greg and DJ about this. You gotta look at a lot of things. I talked about the Georgia of it all. That is shorthand for like, what was this guy asked to do in the defense? Was he asked to, was he aligned inside a lot? Was he asked to eat up doubles? How many snaps did he actually play? Position change. Micah Parsons didn't have a lot of college sacks because he played off the ball. Right. Were there any injuries? It's not really the case with Stewart. He lined up inside a little bit, but for the most part, he was asked to get after the quarterback throughout the course of his college career, and he just couldn't do it. And I think what concerns me, Diante, is it kind of shows up against the run too. Like, he's so dominant at the beginning of every rep. He either wins with such explosiveness as a pass rusher, or he's in the backfield, but then he just kind of can't get to the ball, right? And I don't know, it's like agility or spatial awareness or whatever, but he's just not a finisher. So it's not like, oh, let's get him in the NFL and teach him a pass rush plan, or, oh, if he just adds to his frame or whatever. It's like he's just kind of missing that quality. So I'm with you, actually. Like, I'm leaning Ezeiruaku, even though athletically nothing jumps out to me. He's just a damn good pass rusher.
Right. And there are certain places he can land where it's like, okay, I trust that this team isn't going to need to play you for the first couple years of your career very much. You can kind of learn how to be a run defender. And I do think if you're trying to make the case for Stewart, it's that he's more of a disruptor than a production guy. as a run defender. And like you said, when he gets out of his stance and he wins, he gets a step ahead of the tackle. He definitely looks like, all right, there's so much there that we can build off of, at least from a run defense perspective. I think that there are times, as you mentioned, where he gets leverage. It looks like he's in position to kind of lock a guy out, disengage, go out and range for a TFL or be able to get it, be a part of the picture in the run fit. And then nothing else happens, right? Now you're looking at another guy who's on their defense, right? Nick Scorton is somebody who I think is a lot more polished in that respect as a run defender. You're seeing somebody else make a play for Texas A&M, and you're just watching Shemar Stewart, and it's like, why couldn't that have been you making that play, right? What's missing here? What are we not getting here from you as a defensive end? I just think the issue is that based off of at least the conversations that are happening with him as a player right now, he's going to end up being like a top half or around the middle of the first round guy. And just looking at the profile, that's just not befitting of a player who's walking in the league that's basically going to be square one from a polished perspective as an edge rusher. If Ezeiruaku fails, I know how he's going to fail. It's going to be because he's too light to hold up in the run game. Just because he's polished doesn't mean he's going to win all the time. You don't necessarily get dominant production on a week-to-week basis when you're watching his film, even though he does a pretty good job of winning a lot of pass rush reps in a way that you would like to see for an edge rusher coming into the league. With Shemar Stewart, there are just so many ways where it can go wrong, and he ends up being what's effectively a non-entity for your defensive line rotation. And I don't think that if you're drafting in the top 15, top 20, I don't think you can bear that risk.
Would you rather have Stewart or Mykell Williams?
I'm taking Mykell Williams.
So I have him above Stewart. There. I think that Stewart has a higher ceiling, Mykell has a higher floor. Let's start there. Yeah. So Mykell last year, 5 sacks, but again, the Georgia, it's like a rotation the way they play with their defense, and
it's one of the most frustrating things to try to evaluate.
Right? Against. Like, what is he being asked to do? What did he do with what he was asked to do? I think part of the reason I'd say he has floor is because I think he's going to be a very good run defender in the NFL. So let's start there. I think you saw that on tape in college. He's got the size, the athleticism to have success with that in the NFL as well. I think whether or not he can be more as that, just he's one where it's not like with Stewart, it's finishing. With Mykell, it's actually earlier in the rep where I'm like, ooh, your timing's a little off, or he doesn't really have the pass rush moves quite yet. It's a lot of bull rushes, long arms. Yeah. But if he can develop that, I think because of his athletic traits and his size and the run defense, you can get a plus player out of him.
He's 100% a traits over production guy. And I just think the sales pitch is a little bit easier when you contextualize the lack of production in 2024 with the fact that he was dealing with an ankle injury. And I do think that showed up on tape often, even in the run game. I think that he's very polished with his hand usage. He knows how to lock guys out, how to control the edge. Even if he's aligned on the inside, I thought he did a pretty good job for being a guy who's 260 pounds at the combine, or being able to control blocks from the interior. And then when I think about the fact that he can't really burst the way that I think that he can, because he wasn't right, especially on the back half of the season when he was fighting through this ankle injury, I don't know exactly what it's going to look like when he's healthy, because he's a guy you mentioned with Georgia, younger player. I think he's going to be 21 at the time of the draft, right? So you're talking about a nice trajectory in terms of age development, but didn't play a lot last year in 2023 because they had another deep front seven. You get that breakout game in the bowl game against Florida State, and then he's hurt this year. So you just don't have a lot of tape to bank upon where you can say these are his best reps and what it'll look like in the league. I just think you look at the 34.5-inch arms, basically, you look at the 10-yard split in the 40, and you're like, okay, that looks like what you want to see from an edge rusher. And I think that his hand usage will lend itself towards him eventually developing something that he can lean upon as a pass rusher. And he's a guy that, and this is similar to Shemar Stewart, or maybe a little bit more so for him than Shemar Stewart, he didn't spend a bunch of time as like a 9 technique. He didn't spend a bunch of time being able to dig his heels in and really be able to tear off up the field to get after the quarterback and be disruptive in that way. And I just trust that he's going to figure that part out. Even if he's not a number one pass rusher, he could be a really good secondary guy.
A couple of good, really good performances against high-level competition. Texas is one where I was watching that. I was actually not watching. I was watching the Texas offense and Kelvin Banks Jr. and he had a couple of really good reps against him. I think Banks Jr. is a really good player, so that's encouraging as well. You have to consider the level of competition that some of these guys are facing. He feels like a Packer.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, that's their type, right? If they're drafting the type, he's 100% their type. I thought the same thing for like Tampa Bay. If they go edge rush again, he
Yeah.
definitely fits the bill there. Long arms, explosive guy, traits over production coming into the league, somebody who can be versatile and line up in a different bunch of different spots from the edge. So yeah, I think the middle of the first round is a spot where you can take him, hope he's healthy, and I think that there's going to be something there early. And I think he has one of the higher ceilings of all the edge rushers in this class.
Pearce Jr. was the last one for me. I really struggled with him because um I just found him to be really inconsistent. He's
Yes.
really explosive, and I think he's another guy where the traits are going to be really enticing to certain teams. I actually didn't see how he's tested or not, but on tape he looks really fast. Physically good build, a little bit light. That shows up as well. But I think like how do I put this? Like played a little out of control in moments in a way where I was
Yes.
like I don't know. I didn't see everything that I wanted to, but I have to think that the first step, the athletic traits are going to be enough for. There's so many teams that need edge near the end of the first round. I have to think some team is going to be enticed by that.
And I mean, if he is the last guy in this tier, the last of the clear first round type of edge rushers, you're not going to find his kind of burst, his kind of speed after that, right? So if you're drafting in the 20s and you need an edge rusher, right? If you're Minnesota and you want to bring in another guy who plays along the edge, and maybe there's a little bit of duplicity between he and Dallas Turner, another guy who was a first step winner type. I
Mm.
do think if you're trying to project out how he wins, it's going to be with that. It's just really interesting looking at his combine, right? Because he goes sub 4.5, runs a 4.47, I think like a 1.56 10-yard split. And then he has this 31-inch vert, but a 10-foot broad. So like he's just an interesting linear athlete in that respect. And I do think it shows up on tape. He doesn't dominate with it, which is frustrating, right? Like it kind of clicks on and clicks off. There's a defensive tackle we'll get to as we talk about this, who's another kind of click it on, click it off type of guy that can be frustrating in that respect. And you just don't see enough from him as a run defender. He's very similar to Mike Green in that respect, where it's like he'll get his hands on guys, he'll kind of hold his position, but he doesn't really do anything that affects the play. And you mentioned that kind of out of control nature to him when he is getting upfield. It doesn't feel like he has a plan, and not in the sense of like, oh, I don't know how to use my hands. It's like, do you know how to affect the pocket, right? Can you
Mm.
use your speed to actually affect the pocket, to influence a tackle in pass protection? There's just still a lot of holes in his game. And another player that I don't know is going to give you immediate year one production coming into the league.
Defensive tackles. All right, I'm going to give you my tiers. I got Mason Graham in his own tier. And then I have Derrick Harmon and Kenneth Grant in the next tier. Two totally different players.
Yes.
So it's really like, what do you need? I think like I could actually, let me put it this way. I actually had Kenneth Grant a little higher, which I know is not everyone agrees, but that there's a positional value. He's pure nose, one tech.
Yeah.
Derrick Harmon's kind of a more valuable position. Break. And then I have Nolen, Alexander, Williams, Collins. I mean, I kind of have a bunch of. I'll put those four in the next tier, but again, you have a mix of different positions. It's weird. I think all of. I was just going back and forth with John Ledyard about this. I think all the noses in this draft are awesome.
They're
Like
all great. They're all really great.
Grant, Tyleek Williams, and Alfred Collins. If you need just a gigantic human to plug in the middle of the defense, this is a great draft for you, and you don't have to get one in the first round.
I agree. And I think it's interesting because they're not first round guys. And I think that, Jordan Davis not really developing himself as a third down player kind of helps to
Yeah.
influence the way the league is looking at this. If you're a second round team, if you're a team that has, 3 or 4 picks in the top 75 and you need to address your defensive interior, this is the draft for it. You don't have to reach for guys. And they're guys that can come in, even if they're not a 3-down value type of player, they can give you something that really matters on first and second down because they're not just space eaters. We've got a lot of big bodies that get out of their stance really well. So I would definitely agree with you from that respect. And I think that my tiers kind of work out the same way too. I think that there's an argument that Kenneth Grant, because of position, you can kind of play with. Do you want to drop him lower? I just think that he's significantly better at some of the things that he's good at than the other nose tackles, right? Like I just find him to be in a different tier in terms of being explosive out of his stance and affecting the run game and his motor and all that. But yeah, I think these tiers kind of break out the same for me as well.
Yeah, I think of those three, Grant is the only one who gives you some pass rush. I mean,
Yeah.
Tyler Collins has maybe the funniest tape in the NFL draft. Though. That dude just like he just like sits on people. He's like, oh,
Yes.
you wanted to run the ball up the gut? Not today.
Not here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's start with Mason Graham because I actually have found more debate on this in recent days than I expected. Not about whether or not he's DT1. That's kind of consensus, but I guess about whether or not he's a true blue chipper. And I do
Right.
think that is a debatable question, right? Like, because we've got Carter, Hunter, Genty are the really the ones that everybody agrees on.
Mm-hmm.
Grant, feel like people view him more as like almost like a Ted McMillan, maybe a little bit higher than that because he's, definitely going to go in the top 8, probably 5th.
Yeah.
Do you feel like he deserves that level of scrutiny? Like I guess because we agree he's DT1, and I think
Yeah.
there's a lot about him that we both like. I can talk about that shortly. But do you feel like he's a can't miss, going to be like a Pro Bowler type guy?
See, that's where it gets tricky,
Yeah.
right? Like, can't miss, yes, because the floor is so high, right? Like, he's not a built in the lab guy. He's a checks every box type of guy, right? Like, you're going to see, if you love Mason Graham, if you're a film watcher, and this is something for me, like thinking about 2023 when Michigan is winning a national title, and you're hearing about all these offensive guys who are going to go to the NFL. And I was watching a college football semifinal against Alabama, and I'm like, the best player on this team is number 55.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you watch him against Washington, it's the same thing. I think that he does everything from a technical perspective that you want to see. And I think that some of the athletic traits are just good enough to merit him being considered basically a lot to go in the top 10. And I'm sure that every mock draft now is probably hits at 100% rate. When you get to Jacksonville, that's the pick, right? Because he's going to be the best defensive tackle. He's got enough flexibility on the interior where he can take on double teams. It's not the best trait that he has, but he can handle that. He can be a disruptor. He's quick out of his stance, doesn't have length, but he has great hand usage and knows how not to be kind of swallowed up on the interior with that lack of length. And I just love his football IQ, right? He knows how teams want to block him. He knows how to beat blocks, and he's got a great motor and makes tackles in the backfield as well. Like, again, he's a checks every box kind of guy. And for that reason, in this class where there's a lot of traits, no production, no traits, massive holes on one end and a big strength on the other, Mason Graham is just a very easy evaluation because you know exactly what you're seeing. It's consistent on a week-to-week basis, and it's been like that for him for the last 2 years.
I think the 30,000 foot kind of view of where I view him, where he stacks up, he's closer to Byron Murphy Jr. to me than he is to Jalen Carter. And I think that's kind of like and Byron Murphy Jr. I think is going to be a really good NFL player, but also, a little bit shorter. Whereas Carter was a guy who you saw it in college, you see it in the pros, dominates double teams, not just against the run, but is like defeating them as a pass rusher.
Unblockable guy.
And I think that's probably what's missing in Mason Graham's tape for me is just, if you double, again, he can hold his ground. He's really strong. And he gets into your pads just like so quickly, and his hand usage is so great. He's so good at using his size as natural leverage. That's his calling card to me, right? Yeah. And I think he was a wrestler. It shows up. But while he's a plus pass rusher, and that's why he's where he is. It's not just he's not a dominant one, I think. And I think that's probably what separates it for me. Still really, really good player, really good traits. Size is a question, but he overcomes it with all the things that we discussed. If I'm a Jags fan, I'm happy. I think especially relative to at that point in the draft, once you've gotten out of those blue chippers, there's nobody else who I think is like an obvious, at the positions that the Jags need, who is like a can't miss guy. He's the most clearest, like dominates his positional group. Okay, so you then also have Harmon with me, as your next DT. Okay, that's interesting. So I watched him early on, and I was higher on him, I felt like, than folks I talked to. And then I kind of talked to more people, and it seemed like there was a more agreement or appreciation for him. I guess I'm a little bit confused why people aren't higher on him. I mean, he's 6'5". He's built incredible. Like, just the thing that jumps out the most is just the frame.
Right.
the agility at his size, and then he's already a plus pass rusher. I mean, he led all defensive tackles so he had 49 pressures the regular season, I believe. That's the most of any defensive tackle in this draft. That would have ranked 12th amongst the edges. More than Shemar Stewart. So I get Diante, I'm like, what's not to like? You got
Yeah, I don't know
a
what's clicking
freaking
with Jalon.
giant here who can get to the quarterback. And by the way, he's good against the run too. He's eats up double teams. I mean, he kind of like reminds me a little of Leo Williams. What am I missing something? Like what?
Well, the fascinating thing to me is that nobody talks about him like he might be a potential blue chip guy, right? Like you mentioned, physically, he checks all the boxes. He's got the height. He's not like, and this is one thing if you want to critique Mason Graham, right? Mason Graham's kind of like 295. I think he kind of buffed up his weight to get to the combine or to his pro day to get across that 300-pound threshold. Harmon actually probably plays maybe a little too big. Like I think at his pro day, he was like 320.
Yeah.
At the combine, he was 315, right? And for that, he's still a sub 5 40-yard dash player, right? Like, and that's what you want to see for a guy that's above 300 pounds. And that explosiveness isn't just at the workouts. It shows up on film. He gets out of his stance really well. He's got powerful hands. He has the length. And it's not like he's just a big guy who's playing three technique because all he cares about is getting after the quarterback. You mentioned it. He can play the run really well. He can handle double teams. He has the strength, and he's able to, it's actionable strength, right? It's not just nose tackle. I'm just going to sit on my technique and you're not going to move me. I can move you even if I'm being double teamed because he has that kind of power. I like his hand usage. He is one of those guys that's like, we're going to look up probably in 2 years and be like, how was he the 18th pick in that draft? Right? Because he's giving you instant 3-down value. And he's a guy, because he is 315 and 320, you can bounce him back and forth between playing as a nose, as a shade, as a 2-eye, or being more of that 3 technique type of player where he can kind of tear off, get upfield, and be more of a disruptor. I like him. He's scheme versatile, and there's really no reason I don't see on tape why he wouldn't be able to do everything he did at Oregon in the league.
Some missed tackles, but I would say some of that is he wins too quickly. Like some of that comes with him. He's in the backfield a lot, and so if a back makes him miss, that's going on the stat sheet. I think he could still improve as a pass rusher, obviously, both in terms of his plan and his finishing. But yeah, I just view him as maybe the highest upside of the 3 techs. Again, Graham is a better player, but
yeah,
God, I mean, just look at this guy. Like
the raw ability is there.
He is really impressive to look at. Okay, so we mentioned that. Let's just talk about the run guys. I mentioned Kenneth Grant is in this tier because I do think he is a tier above. Just because he gives you a little bit more as a pass rusher. Really, really good athlete too at his size. And then, I just highlighted Tyleik Williams and Alfred Collins, who's also just, I mean, I don't know where these guys are going to go, but God, if you're a team like Dallas, right?
Yeah.
The Chargers
Williams would definitely be the guy. Yeah. I love Tyleik Williams for just like how he's able to. It's not that he's just a 300, 330 big time guy, and he's slow out of his stance, and he's just eating a block and just being still, right? Like he might not have a lot of pass rush juice, right? There's not a guy who on second and third step is going to be just as dominant as he is on his first, but he is like the definition of a 330-pound gap plugger type of guy, right? If there is an instance where you are concerned, it's just about the fact that he doesn't have a lot of length. And that does show up at times against like top competition, where if he doesn't win out of his stance, if he's not the first guy out of his stance when the ball is snapped, you're not going to get big time extension, but he's not moved, right? If he wants to sit down and say, you're not moving him, you're not moving that guy. I think Alfred Collins is another guy who definitely meets that mold. But I would say the most interesting of that group probably is Kenneth Grant, right? Like, because that strength is explosive, a little bit more explosive than it is with, especially with Williams. I would say that Collins is kind of in between the two. Even if you don't expect any pass rush juice for him, he has enough quick reaction, right? He bats passes downs. He can push the pocket. He's got a great motor. Kenneth Grant does at his size 140. He's got enough speed for his size. He does just about everything you want to, right? He's another guy that's the definition of a gap plugging nose tackle and somebody who's going to give you big time value on first and second down.
Do you feel that it's unfair for us to have Harmon? Like, do you think that there is a separate tier gap between him and Walter Nolen? Let's end here, because I do think there are a lot of folks who are higher on Nolen than Harmon. There are people who think that Walter Nolen could be the best 3-tech in this draft. And if you just picked out like 10 of his plays, I would agree. I think that kind of captures why I just can't get there with him. The highs are as high as any defensive player in this draft. The traits are there, the athleticism, good size. It's just consistency for me, or the lack thereof.
Probably the most frustrating watch of the front seven guys that I was evaluating in preparation for this podcast and just getting ready for the draft with the ringer. It's like, I don't know if there's any more guy who's more of like a click on, click off type. Like you mentioned, he'll have a drive where he gets on the field and it's like, okay, first, second, and third down, you decided you didn't want to be on the field. So you're going to make the plays to get yourself right back off the field. And it's like, oh man, if you were this at all the times, you would be a top 15 player, right? It's the fact that when it's off, it's all the way off. And then that's probably the most frustrating piece of it for me, is because when you see what he can be as a run defender, he can sit down on his technique. He's got great hands, so he can disengage quickly. If he wants to use an arm over move, if he wants to be explosive, win with speed, he can definitely do so. As a pass rusher, I mean, the upside for him is probably about as high as it is for Mason Graham, if not higher, because of that explosiveness that he walks in the door with. He can transition into pass rush really well. He's got good springs in his lower body, so he can move. He can change direction. He can be explosive linearly. It's just that the want to isn't always there. And I don't know if there's anything more frustrating watching a defensive tackle who, on one instance, can dominate, win it on a double team, get a TFL, and then just take the next play, not totally off, but just be a non-entity. It kills me watching on tape, and I wish that he were more consistent, because if so, he would be right there at the top of this position group.
He's going to fall to Philadelphia.
He's going to be an Eagle.
Yep.
He's going to be
my guy Clint Hurt's going to get his gigantic hands on him. It's going to be so upsetting. Okay, let's take a quick break, come back, and talk about my favorite player in the draft. All right, we're back. Talk about my baby, my favorite player in the draft, Jihaad Campbell, linebacker out of Alabama. So linebackers, we're only going to talk about two, both of whom I like a lot. I really like Carson Schwesinger a lot too. I really enjoyed his tape. But Jihaad is linebacker 1. I think he is going to be the steal of this draft, because I don't know where he's going to go. We can talk about that. And he also has, he had a labrum surgery, which is going to probably push his start time he might not be ready at the beginning of the season, I believe. We'll see. That could also cause him to drop, obviously. I'm just saying, I think he might be my favorite off-ball linebacker I've watched since Roquan Smith as a prospect.
I think I'm with you on that. Yeah. I would say, like, it's funny, right? Like, everybody kind of has their guys, right? Every year you might have your guy with the draft class. This is like, of all the prospects that we're going to discuss, this is the one who, for any negative, I'm just like totally hand waving it away. Like, don't care. Don't care. I don't care that he doesn't read things out the fastest all the time. Don't care about that. I don't care about any inconsistencies with taking on blocks. Doesn't matter. Like, have you seen him run and hit? Have you seen him play a window and zone coverage? Right? Have you seen the speed be used to kind of range from sideline to sideline? I think, and for me, it's not about high floor, high ceiling as much as like the skill set that he's going to walk in the league with is going to allow him to play so many different versions of linebacker. Yeah. If you want him to be a pure zone dropper as a Mike, he can do that. If you want him to be kind of that gap plugger, downhill, Patrick Queen type, where you're blitzing him a bunch, where you're using him as a part of the run fit, who can walk out and match up on running backs from time to time, he can do that. And if you want to take the time, and this is maybe where the longest trajectory is in terms of development, if you want to take the time to be able to teach him man coverage, being able to match tight ends, being able to handle slots, that's probably where he needs the most amount of time. But all the athletic traits you need to be effective in that, from that respect, are there. right? He's got the height. You see him play windows really well in zone coverage. I think he can jump on routes eventually as he just learns the game. This is another guy that's kind of not a tweener, but a positional transition guy, right? Started off as an edge rusher, then played a little bit of edge and linebacker. And then last year, I think played a little bit more linebacker, or at least the tape that popped most is when he was playing at off-ball linebacker. I just don't know how this guy fails. And if he fails, for me, it's going to be the fault of whoever drafted him. I just can't imagine this not working out for a player like Jihaad Campbell.
Audio audience, Diante are like literally cheesing talking about him on camera. He has every tool you need to be an elite modern linebacker in today's NFL. He still has to develop some of those tools. You hit on all of the traits. His length, I think, is so that's what really jumped out to me first. And I think you and I were texting a little bit about Tremaine Edmonds, who has that same arm length, but I like him a lot more than I like Tremaine Edmonds, in college. And but I do think like you see the length shows up all over his tape, whether it's tackling or getting those arms in there in coverage, putting his arms up, as well as the sideline to sideline athleticism. For me, it's like I also think he's not the best tackler, but he's got decent knockback. He's never going to be like a true thumper. That's not his game, but it's good enough. He strikes, right?
Yeah.
I think when his game, and it won't take that long. I really believe that, because he is new to the position and already so good. When it speeds up like 1/2 of a second is when it's gonna like just go nuclear, right? Because you see it sometimes, the diagnosis, he's still kind of figuring it out in terms of his like route recognition and the coverage, in terms of like reading the run and sorting through the mess. He can be like just a tick late. And I think just once you turn that knob a little bit more, man, that's why I love the idea of him like ending up in like a Tampa playing with Levante David.
That would be nice.
I just think
really nice.
The sky is the limit for Jihaad Campbell. I'm so excited to watch him in the NFL.
I'm with you. And I think that like Edmonds is a really good comp, right? Unique body type, has a lane, basically has the size of an edge rusher playing linebacker. And I wouldn't be surprised if early in his career, there are a couple of the frustrations that existed for Edmonds, right? Where you're just kind of more of just a rangy guy, kind of running around, don't have all the polish in terms of being able to read things out in the box. But the high-end outcome for a Jihaad Campbell, and God, I hate doing this because this is my favorite linebacker in the league, and it's an unfair comparison. Why can't he turn into a Fred Warner type where he doesn't have to be a thumper, where he can be more of a rangy tackler type? Like you said, the knockback is there. I think that really all he needs is that kind of play recognition, being able to diagnose things early. If he gets that, he has all the athletic ability in the world to beat the ball where it's going.
I had another random one, but young Darius Leonard, the way he
I like that a lot too.
Moved a little bit, and the run and hit a little bit before he got injured. Just folks. Whew. Okay. I also really like Carson Schwesinger, and I think he's going to go in the second round, and I think he's going to be a really good pro. 6'2", 242. He's slender. That's the biggest downside on him, but the coverage also, hasn't played a ton of football, by the way. I think he's only had a year as a starter. Is that right? Yeah, 1 year starter.
Yeah.
Doesn't look like it, man. Super smart player, really good in coverage, really good just flying to destroy screens. Fantastic as a blitzer. Jihaad Campbell is more of a pure pass rusher, and I think you can actually line him up at the edge here and there and sprinkle that in. He's not like a NFL pass rusher or whatever. Yeah. Schwesinger, though, was like really, really good as a blitzer, and I think some of that has to do with his timing and speed, but some of it is also he just sees the field really well. I think the downside is just he's good in the open field, but I talked about Jihaad Campbell having good knockback. Schwesinger can get pushed around a little bit. I think he will be in the NFL. But in terms of coverage ability, movement in space, and the plus he gives you as a blitzer, I think there's a lot that NFL teams will like.
I mean, the agility is there, the aggression is there, right? You can see him close quickly. He does a great job of reading things out. He plays well in zone coverage, right? A lot of the things that make up for the new thresholds and baselines of being a good modern linebacker are there for Schwesinger. I think that if there is an issue, he's probably going to be a guy who misses some tackles early in his career. You got to mention that he just flies at guys at times, right? Like there's not there's thump in the sense that he is going to attack tackles aggressively. He doesn't always make tackles with as much like refinement and technique as you like. And some of that might just be like a playing time thing. He might just need a little bit more experience. But yeah, you can definitely feel that football IQ. I think that Matt Milano would be a good comp to bring up other Bills linebackers. Brought up Tremaine Edmonds for Jihaad Campbell. I can definitely see
I got
Matt
Zach
Milano
Bond.
as
I
a
got a
ceiling.
cross-racial comp in here.
There we go.
I
There
was
we go.
working for it. Yeah, Milano is the one that jumps out. Bond's a much better run defender, but
Right.
I do think there are some similarities in their games in terms of the way he covers, reads things out, plays screens, the chess piece aspect. Also, Bond, right, started as a pass rusher. Yeah, I mean, just it's built a little bit differently, but yeah, I really like him. Okay, let's talk about the corners. I really warmed up to this class as my work on it went along. At first, I was like, I don't know, outside of Hunter, how do we feel? So the way I have this stacked is Hunter is in his own tier. Shocker. Yep. I have Johnson and Barron in that order. Will Johnson out of Michigan, Jahdae Barron out of Texas in my next tier. A lot of folks have Barron, not a lot, but some have Barron over Johnson. So that's an interesting debate.
Interesting,
They're very different players. And then this is how I ended up ranking the final group. Trey Amos, Maxwell Hairston, Benjamin Morrison. I'm still holding on. And then Siobhan Revel. I think I'm saying his name.
I think so. Yeah, I think it's Revel. I don't know if it's Revel or Revel. Actually, don't give me the
Revel. Okay. And then I also like Darian Porter, who I talked about in the Combine Pod. So I guess I could throw him in there too. How did they shake out for you?
I have Hunter in his own tier, obviously. I have Johnson above Barron. And then I kind of have the same kind of cluster of Amos, Hairston, Revel. And then I'm separating Morrison right now, right? Because I just need more time. I need more time to sell myself on Morrison, obviously dealing with the injury. And I think Revel obviously checks that box as well. I just don't know exactly what Morrison's timeline is as it stands right now. And he's another guy who doesn't have a lot of length playing out at corner too. So there's going to be some usage questions, I think, for Morrison when he gets to the league. But yeah, we could start with Hunter, who is very clearly number one, will be number one at this position. And at the other position he plays, more likely than not.
Have you so Ben and I talked about this when we talked about Hunter as a receiver, and I explained, Ben and I disagreed a little bit because I said, at first I was like, just play corner, Vixen's my receiver. And then I started I watched him again as a receiver, and I was like, it doesn't matter. Whatever. Yeah.
I became very agnostic as well. That was my same prospect. That was my same process for him, was like, yeah, I mean, he's just more valuable at corner. Obviously, you see like some of the play recognition, how he plays in zone coverage, how he plays the ball, right? And then I started thinking about that. I was like, all those same things show up for him as receiver skills. Why wouldn't he be able to succeed as a receiver? He might not be a number one receiver, right? Like, he's not going to be a Justin Jefferson, but he's a guy you can move around. I think that he can learn more as a route runner. I don't think he was necessarily asked to be the most detailed route runner at Colorado. So that's a major area of growth for him. But the stuff that he walks in with, the raw traits he walks in with, I mean, he can be the number one guy in the draft, like I said, at either spot, and can be an instant impact player at both. You can't go wrong, even though I might, as a defensive guy, like to see him play more corner.
Really quickly, let's talk about why he's special as a corner. It's actually really similar to why he's special as a receiver in a lot of ways, starting with, of course, the ball skills, manifesting itself differently as a corner. But it's just like the timing, the catch radius, the contested catch ability, which is really remarkable at his size, the way he plays through contact and asserts control at the top of routes, or again when he's playing cornerback at the catch point. The body control is remarkable. Athleticism, the stop start, the change of direction, one of the just purest football athletes I've ever seen. Football athlete, I'm just freaking words, I don't know, man. It's funny watching him. He's, by the way, he tries to tackle. He's not the best tackler. If there's a ding on him, he's not an elite tackler, and he's got his size is definitely, he's not going to be an elite press man corner because of his size, but he tries. He's effortful. He tries so hard on both sides. It's just remarkable. Is there anything like you would really highlight just jumping out on his tape as a corner that you were like, this is going to be like his calling card in the NFL?
It would probably be the ball skills, right? It's the ball skills, the route recognition, right? What he's able to do to attack the ball, whether he's playing for depth, playing from depth, whether he's playing a little bit stickier in coverage in a match or man coverage type of deal. And I think that body control that you mentioned is exactly why, for the fact that he's not like a 200-pound corner, his size never seems to be an issue for him in coverage, right? Like guys aren't able to bully him really at the catch point outside of that Stanford game last year against like Emmanwori, who just has him clearly kind of outclassed in terms of weight and height and length.
Yeah.
So, but outside of that, like he can do everything you need a corner to do in terms of being a playmaker. He's not going to be much of a tackler, which means you're probably not going to see him much in the slot unless it's a man coverage matchup type of thing. But the ceiling for him is just so high in coverage, right? I expect him to be maybe not Stingley because Stingley's a bigger body, but in terms of just the ball skills and how he's able to attack it in the air from zone or man coverage, it's going to be hard testing a guy like that who can play the ball as well as Hunter can.
Zone, man, it doesn't really. I mean, zone, he's going to play the ball more, so you like that for him. And I think, man, there's a couple things probably he could improve at, but I'm not concerned.
He's
even
like
if
he's going to be like Greg Newsome at worst to me.
At worst, yeah. Even if he loses at the line of scrimmage against bigger receivers, his recovery speed. I think it's really similar again to the receiver thing, where his size only shows up for me at the line of scrimmage because once the play begins, it doesn't matter because of everything else. He's able to compensate for it so much. He doesn't get penalized. He's not grabby. I mean,
yeah,
he's just great. Really quickly before I move on, if he was to play corner, is there a scheme, a defense that you would like to see him in at the top?
I wouldn't hate him in New York. Then now, from a draft history perspective, they've taken more of like the linear athlete, physical at the line of scrimmage, kind of man coverage types of guys. But I would like him in New York, if not New York, and he's never going to be available for at this pick. But playing for Patrick Graham in Las Vegas, where they do a lot of different things on the back end, I think that will be a lot of fun to see him playing as well. But yeah, he can't go wrong scheme-wise.
Poor Patrick Graham. I don't know who's quarterback one right now is off the top of my head. I'm trying to remember.
I don't think so because Hobbs is in Green
Hobbs
Bay now.
Gone. Yeah. Mike Jones. All right. Will Johnson, Jahdae Barron. So I have Johnson over him. People are mixed. Will Johnson out of Michigan. There's some debate, I think, over how good he is. It's funny. I did a mock draft earlier in the week with Todd McShay, and I gave him both choices for San Francisco at 11. And he ended up going with Johnson, but he said he likes Barron better, but we agreed San Francisco doesn't need a nickel. Why do you like Will Johnson more? What do you like about his game?
I just think that we've had these conversations about checking boxes for Michigan defensive players. He just checks all the boxes as an outside corner, right? Like if you have questions about what his ceiling is as a man coverage guy, because he can look maybe not stiff, but doesn't have the greatest change of direction ability when he's playing tight end coverage. Right. Exactly. That is an issue. I do think though that he can be a poor man Sauce Gardner, right? Like if he's going to be a linear guy, he might not always be able to win at the line of scrimmage as a press player. But if you need him to play in a cover 3 quarters type of scheme, the ball skills are there to be able to play it in the air. Does a really good job of jumping routes, right? Like that's where he flashes most is when he recognizes things, whether he's playing cover 2 or playing a deep third or quarters, right? He can definitely do that from zone coverage. I do have questions about what it's going to be like on the more physically kind of dominant wide receivers for him, or guys who are really refined as route runners. I just think that the floor is high enough to merit him being ahead of a guy like Jahdae Barron, who I have more questions about in terms of role and usage based on where he lands.
Yeah, so Michigan is primarily a zone defense, almost very little man coverage.
Yeah, Winker and a lot of zone.
So I love the fit. It looked like a San Francisco for that reason, by the way. You talked about Sauce Gardner. I think it's a really, my dream for him would be in that style of defense just because he has good zone eyes. He understands what quarterbacks want to do with the football. He click and close is really great. He is great. He checks all the boxes in terms of size and length. I think his athleticism is just okay. Yeah. And that's probably why he's not in that, special tier for me. But I I think as the mental side of his game develops, because of the size and the length, I think he can be a number one corner in the NFL. I really do.
And
Good
he's a good
tackler.
tackler.
Yeah, jinx. I like Barron though. I really do. So wait, I should have mentioned this. Johnson's got probably like 2 or 3 inches on him, right?
Yeah.
I think with Barron, I just have questions over inside outside. He to me looks like a nickel. And by the way, nickel's really valuable in today's NFL. Like I've seen him compared to Cooper DeJean, and if we were to do a redraft, obviously DeJean would go much higher. I think
Yeah.
DeJean's a better prospect to me. Um, I think he's got some size on him too. But I love how hard he plays. I love the way he hits. Barron talking about.
Yeah.
You can tell he like relishes contact. I love that. I love the way he takes on screens. And like, he can play man. I think about the Michigan game against when he was manned up on Loveland, who's a really tricky cover. I thought he held his own really well there. I just think he's a little bit like he's a nickel to me. Do you think he can play outside, or he can, I guess.
I guess he can in theory, right? Like there's just enough coverage skills. He ran a sub 4.40, so the speed is there for a guy who's not 6 foot, right?
Yeah.
Like there's enough there where he can run. I just wouldn't want him outside if I had my choice. It's not like Trent McDuffie, right? Trent McDuffie was like very much a pure coverage guy, and it was just a matter of can that size translate on the outside? And I think that for McDuffie, the way it's worked out is great in the slot, good outside. For Barron, I feel like it's more good in the slot, serviceable if he has to be outside. He's definitely competitive, right? Like he wants to make contact at the catch point. He wants to break patches up at the catch point, and that part is encouraging. You just don't necessarily see the ball production to lead you to believe, whether he's inside or out, that he's going to be able to produce at the next level in that respect. But as a nickel, he's going to be a part of the run fit all day long, right? Like he relishes in that, like you said. He can handle tight ends at times if they're split out in the slot, and that's where the matchup is. He's very physical, right, within that 5-yard zone. So he can get hands on guys and really reroute them. And I think that's going to be valuable for a lot of teams that want to kind of base out of nickel personnel, right? Mm-hmm. Like I don't know if he's going to be available by the time Houston picks, and they've got enough guys who can play in the slot where he wouldn't be a fit for them either. But I think about, you mentioned San Francisco. I think about teams like maybe a Miami, even though they have needs elsewhere, on their roster. There are a lot of teams that can use a guy who's going to get hands on players, that can move around as a nickel guy, has just enough positional flexibility where if guys go down or you need to make a rotation, he can jump outside in a pinch. But yeah, the tackling, the competitiveness, the physicality, those are the sales pitches for me. And he's got just enough speed, I think, to kind of merit being a top 15, top 18 type of pick.
Yeah, there are some similarities with Devin Witherspoon. The difference is, from remembering watching Witherspoon in college, I thought Witherspoon was really smooth in man coverage on the perimeter and really twitchy and shifty. And like he was just so good at staying in phase and mirroring wide receivers' feet. You don't really see that on tape with Barron to the same degree, but I think he could be a really good player, especially in the right situation. All right. So in that next group, I had, like I said, Amos, Hairston, Morrison. Some people also put Thomas from FSU in this group, Revel. So I'm going to talk about Amos here because he's my favorite of this group. Length, man. I mean, those long arms. It's not just that he has long arms. It's that it's the thing you notice. It just jumps out. He plays. He is so good at knowing when to get his hands involved and timing his PBUs as a tackler. It shows up too, although he's a little bit high. I think so. He's 6'1", 190. Well, I also really loved the fact that he played well against good competition. The games that I watch, I usually start with like LSU's, your Georgias, and I thought he more than held his own. The more I watched of him, the more I liked him. Ball skills. I mean, I don't think he came down with that many picks. I don't have him in front of me, but very high forced incompletion rate shows up. I just think he really has higher upside than maybe I thought coming into this.
Yeah, I would say that like Amos versus Hairston is a really interesting conversation for me because Hairston's kind of got him beat in terms of just like pure speed, right? I think Amos is a little bit more complete as a coverage player right now. He's got some zone and man versatility, very aggressive at the catch point. You see that kind of polish, like you said, he's competitive against the best competition on Ole Miss's schedule. I love the way that he attacks as a tackler as well, right? Like another guy that just doesn't have a lot of holes in his game. Ceiling isn't the highest, but he's going to be a really good number 2 corner anywhere that he lands. And another guy that, like, in the second round could very easily land in a place like, I think about Cincinnati, who I think has some top 100 draft capital that needs to bring in a guy who's polished at corner. He can land in a place like that and instantly be the best guy on the roster there and be able to handle a lot of different things on the back end.
I really would like him for Buffalo at the end of the first
Buffalo
round.
would be good too.
Yeah,
He and Benford would be a really good combo.
Playing zone. He could play press man. They did a bit of both, but I like him playing off and being able to get to read quarterbacks and produce on the ball that way. I feel like with a lot of these corners, there's length versus like he's not a crazy athlete, but he's
Right.
length makes up for it in a way that I think is pretty noticeable. And I ended up liking Hairston. Obviously, the speed is alone is going to get him drafted pretty high. I just don't know if I see it there with him in terms of like he's really slender, man coverage. I have questions. I didn't really like what I saw from him in that regard. But again, I feel like he's probably going to go in the first or high second because of that speed.
I feel like every year that we've done this together, there's been a corner who is like 180-ish pounds, runs 4.3 or 4.2-ish.
Forbes scared me off. I'm done.
Exactly,
I'm not
like the route
anymore.
jumper, not necessarily a pure corner type. Maybe, I think he has some issues with trying to be physical in ways that don't work out for him because he doesn't have a lot of length, right? Which means him to be a little bit grabby and handsy at times. And you're not going to get much out of him as a tackler, right? And there's going to be health concerns because of the size. I'm not out on him, right? Because he is fascinating because of the speed, because of the route jumping ability. The vertical, I think, was at like 39 inches. So there's a lot of things to like about Hairston. He's just not a complete coverage prospect yet. And for me, if I have Amos on the board, even if Sharon Ravel, because of his injury that he's recovering from, bumps him out of the first round, if those 3 guys are available, I would say Amos and Ravel would definitely go above Hairston for me.
I alluded to Morrison. So for those who don't know, Benjamin Morrison was like one of the best cornerbacks in football, honestly. And then 2023, he got injured. But even before his injury this year, it was a little bit of a down year for him. Questions about size, tackling, but boy, some of those 2023 games I just can't get out of my head. I just thought he was the best player on the field. So, this projection here, I just think he's so smart. He moves really well. I actually thought I went back and watched the game against Stanford, which was his final game of the 2024 season. I thought he played well. He had a really amazing pick in that game. I think for the right team, if you got like some patience with him coming back off the injury, the upside there is still quite high. All right, safeties.
Yeah.
Don't love this class. I actually ended up I was like trying to tier them and rank them. I ended up going Starks, Emmanwori, Watts, Malachi Starks at the top. I didn't put them in separate tiers though. I put them all in the same tier. I mean, I don't know. I just didn't feel that strongly about anything. Malachi Starks out of Georgia. He was like the dude and then had some up and down play. Nick Emmanwori, South Carolina, athletic freak. Really started climbing purely because of the athleticism, which is insane, by the way. It really is insane. And Xavier Watts, Notre Dame, kind of the opposite, I feel like, of Emmanwori, where he's just like a polished kind of good player, but nothing athletically stands out. Would you rank them differently?
No.
Or is there anyone I'm missing?
Nobody that you're missing, I wouldn't say, right? Like Kevin Winston Jr. is not in that tier, right? He makes good plays, not enough pop for me. Jonas Sanker is kind of interesting for me as well. Again, another guy who just doesn't pop enough. Mukuba, I would rather have him than, Starks or Emmanwori or Watts, right? I think that Watts is a better version of what Mukuba is coming out of Texas. So yeah, I would say that this is the tier. And I think a lot of this just comes down to what you believe will make for the best safety, right? Because
Mm.
Emmanwori is a lot of traits, misses tackles. There's a
Dude, he
lot of
misses so many tackles. I
not the
wanted to
best with
like,
his angles, right? Like, and that leads to missed tackles or times where he's just not even in on the play because he takes poor angles out in space. So then
cannot
it's
get
like,
I made a mistake, which was Alabama was the first game because I saw everybody was like, I saw a picture of him and I was like, whoo, and then I saw
yeah,
the,
get
I
off
mean,
the bus, all star.
he looks like Cam Chancellor, right? So I'm like, yeah, let me dive into this because I love athleticism at the same. I mean, like I said, the first time I saw Kyle Hamilton, the size, the wingspan, and then I put on
Right.
the Alabama tape, and I was just like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah. If you watch the wrong games on Emmanwori, it's a day 3 grade, you
Bless
know?
you. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, because you start with the good. I always start with the good teams, and I just didn't love it. It's just a lie. That said, okay, let me just read this. 4.38 40. So he's 6'3",
6'3",
225. He ran
220. Yep.
a 4.38 40, a 43-inch vert, an 11-foot 6-inch vertical or pretty broad jump. So this is kind of a dumb. I do want to mention this stat because he's the only safety ever to have a sub 40 uh, hit 40 inches and jump at least 11 feet, which is one of those like NBA stats where it's like,
Mhm.
oh, triple double with it.
Yes.
But it actually is very important because he is a true freak. And some team is going to look at him and think, yeah, we can do this. We can make this work. And I mean, he's just a very raw player to me. That's all.
Yeah, it's a lot of shielding your eyes as you make the pick, right? Like, and what do you do with him right out of the gate? Do you want to play him in the slot and hope that he can turn into a strong safety as well? Or do you want to play him as strong safety and then drop him in as kind of like a Sam Backer at times
Yeah,
where he can
that's
be
what I
more
would
of
do.
a blitzer, zone coverage type of guy? And that's kind of the way I would look at it too, right? Like, play him at safety, see if you can figure something out for him at safety. Because I do think if it doesn't work, he can be a big nickel anywhere, right? Then there's just a conversation of like how valuable is being a big nickel based on where you're at in the league, right? And what scheme you're playing in. If he were a good tackler, I would be a little bit more willing to take a chance on some of the rawness and zone coverage. He does have good ball production. I would say he doesn't always have the best feel for routes, though, right? Like he's great at capitalizing on mistakes from quarterbacks, right? If you leave the ball out over the middle of the field, you put too much air under the ball. He is able to use that speed to be able to get to the ball where it's at if he's playing deep in zone. He's just not like a middle of field, center field type where no matter where you're going with the football, he's going to beat you there. And when he comes into the box, if you were a better tackler, I would love it because you do see physicality at times, right? The approach is physical, the execution is just all over the place. So for me, it's kind of too much of a project in a lot of ways. And he's one of those guys that I watched the splash reel early, and it's like, oh, he can run, he can hit a little bit. You've got the ball production, and then you go into the games against the top competition, like you said, and one game after another. I just started kind of walking him down my own board. He can be a late first round pick to me if you don't have a big time need at the position. But if he's a guy that's going to have to play 95% of the snaps on the back end at safety, you're going to have to deal with a lot of warts early in his career.
I think an interesting debate for a team like Minnesota would be Starks versus Emmanwori, right?
Yeah.
Like, do you want the guy who's more pro ready or the guy with potentially the higher ceiling? You got Brian Flores, you got Harrison. You already got safeties in the building. You got Harrison. So who's a veteran who's
Yeah.
maybe the oldest man in the league at this point. So no, he's not. Calais Campbell, by the way, came back, playing for Arizona, keeping that age up. Starks is a funny one. I alluded to, he was probably going into this year. I think people were higher on him. He was asked to do a lot. Once again, we are back with the Georgia defense where it's a very complicated ask of their players. He was their star player, right? Star, not a star.
Yep.
So he was asked to do a lot of things, play in the box, play free safety, played the nickel. I think what makes him a hard eval for me is it's not like, oh, okay, he's got like a high. He's like with Watts, I'm just like, okay, cool, you play safety. I don't know how good he can be, but Starks, it was more like consistency.
Yeah.
Like there were games where I thought this is the best safety in the NFL, like in the draft, no question. And then there were games where he was just busted like bad. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't really. I almost like I would love more than maybe anyone else we talked to sit down with him and have him like walk through some of these ups and downs over the course of the season, because I do believe when he's at his best, he has all the tools you need. Whether it's split safety, so he could do it all in the NFL.
I would say it's one of those funny things because the physical profile, it doesn't fit a guy that would have a lot, that would run hot and cold the way that he did in 2024. Some of his strengths, the way that he's fluid in coverage, the way that he can move in any coverage scheme, whether he's close to the line of scrimmage, whether he's playing a deep half, playing quarters, playing in the middle of the field. He does a lot of things well, right? And that versatility is going to serve him well. That's the sales pitch for him if he's a first round pick, is that you can run whatever you want, right? Like I think I've had him pegged for Los Angeles for the Rams. You know, when I'm looking at a team that could use some back seven help, right? I think the Chargers are another team that could use some back seven help. That versatility would serve them really well too. I think that for him, it's like, why don't you make those wild plays more often? Right?
Yeah.
Like, why do they come and go the way that they do? Because the football IQ is clearly there, right? Like you see when he knows where a play is going and he's able to beat the ball there. It's not just a guy who gets there and maybe just gets a hand on it. He can get,
his
he can turn the ball
crazy.
over. Exactly.
Dude, yeah, it's not like,
the
he's just in the
turnover
right
skills
place.
are there.
Some of his interceptions are as good as any outside of Hunter.
As acrobatic as you'll see, right?
Dude, right. Like what's the one? He had one that was so crazy.
The one that really put him on the map was one against Oregon, I think 2 years ago.
Or that was how long has Bo Nix been? There was one this year that was he truly really impressive interceptions.
And a pure safety too. And that again with Georgia and the way they play defense, like I don't know, because he's played a lot near the line of scrimmage, I think it's easy to say he can be a slot too. I think I kind of like him more as just like your pure safety type, a guy who can kind of bounce around, playing free or strong based on what you need on a game-to-game basis. Again, he doesn't have the greatest range in the world, but he runs well from the middle of the field, right? So I think just as like a pure coverage prospect, I really like him as a safety. It's just a matter of like, will the consistency be there in a way that matches a pretty even physical profile?
Yeah, he's going to the draft. I don't know if you saw that, by the way.
Oh, I didn't see that. I don't see who all is going to the green room.
Actually, I don't think Emmanwori was, but I did see Starks on that list, which kind of is interesting because there are a few teams. Minnesota is one. There's a few other teams. Talked about the Chargers. I don't know. We'll see. He's a tricky one for me. In summary, I think I came out of this higher on linebackers and corners and lower on defensive tackles and safeties in this draft. How about you?
I'd say safeties for sure. I actually think, interesting enough, like a lot of the edge rushers, the more I've watched, I think the more you just see the holes because they are very particular in terms of body types and play styles, where it's a little harder to kind of find places where they're going to be warm welcome scheme wise based on the way that these guys play. And I'm really high on the defensive tackle class. I think the more
you're high on it, you like it.
I really like the defensive tackle class, but I'm a nose tackle guy. I like seeing the 300 pounders on the interior.
If this was 1995, Tyleik Williams
draft.
Kenneth Graham would be like
he might be a top 12 pick, honestly.
Do yourself a favor and watch Tyleik Williams highlights. They are truly one of the funniest things I've seen in a while. This has been really fun. Diante, you're going to be doing draft stuff for the Ringer NFL show all week, I imagine.
That's right. We've got a mock draft we're going to do on the podcast coming up soon. Been working on Cam Ward. There should be something on that coming out soon. And I'll have another mock draft of my own. So, yeah, there's a lot of draft stuff coming from me in the coming weeks.
All right. Well, you guys should check it out. Check out the Ringer NFL show, wherever you get your pods. You can also check out this show on YouTube. As I mentioned, we have another War Room mock draft. I'm going to do a YouTube video this week on a few of my ideal fits for a few teams. I've been thinking those over, maybe some of the ones that we mentioned, perhaps. So you check that out, youtube.com/@Mina Kimes. In the meantime, thank you to everybody at Omaha Productions, Kirsten Sebecki, Anthony Jimenez, Owen Saylor, Jack Foster, Tucker Tashton for working on the show. And speaking of Omaha Productions, please, if you are so inclined, vote for us, Omaha, to win some Webbies. If you're watching this on YouTube, click on the QR code on your screen or linked in the description. And if you're listening in audio, check out the link in the show description to vote for Full Court Press in the limited series category and Paying It Forward in the food and beverage advertising category. And I'll be back next week.